Let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay alert and sober. If there's one takeaway, I think it's don't sleep during the homily. So we are in our second week of our homily series, The Waiting Game, in which we consider the issue of time. For many of us, time isn't a friend. Some of us may find ourselves incredibly busy, rushing from one job to the next with little time to slow down and reflect on what's actually happening. On the other hand, there are those who find the weight of time stretching out before them oppressive, especially in the midst of quarantining. How do you fill all the hours of the day when you're confined and don't have the energy for much activity? This Sunday's gospel passage is in the middle of three parables, all of which are concerned with time. The first, which we explored last week, was a parable of the 10 maidens. The 5 were foolish and 5 were wise, and they were each waiting for the bridegroom. And I raised the questions, do I have the oil of being in the state of grace? Or am I in the empty state of mortal sin? And the second question I raised was, is my life bearing the fruit that Christ wants to see? Then we come to this week's parable, the parable of the talents. And the theme that Father John has chosen for this week is, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? In today's parable, Jesus describes how a man entrusts his property to his servants before going out on a journey. And like the first parable, this is a story about waiting. How do we prepare for the return of the Lord? And what will his judgment be when he appears in glory? The first 2 servants are respectively given 5 talents and 2 talents, a vast amount of money, and they proceed to double them through trade. The third servant, however, who receives 1 talent, he digs a hole and he buries it out of fear. Fear that he might lose it, fear of the master. The first 2 servants have used their time well, whereas the third has made little use of the time given him, whilst he waits for the master to return. For the third servant, time is not a friend, but each moment it's filled with dread, with fear at the thought of losing the talent that he has been given. Fear, rather than anticipating the return of the master with joy. Instead of seeing each moment as transformed in anticipation of this future happiness. Instead of all this, the servant's life is filled with anxiety about what tomorrow will bring. And in many ways, I have to say, it's easier for us to identify with this fearful servant than with the 2 who make great success of all things. I think it's safe to say that all of us are anxious for the future. Some of it is brought about by politics, some of it the coronavirus, perhaps fending for our families, the health of loved ones. Indeed, no matter how secure we feel ourselves to be in this life, who can say with absolute certainty what tomorrow will bring? And I think everybody here knows in some way that he or she will be judged according to the morality of his or her acts. Yet there are many persons who try to ignore this and say all is well and establish a false sense of peace and security. And truly, such persons will be blindsided. We hear the consoling words of Paul to the Thessalonians today. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, for that day to overtake you like a thief. All of you are children of the light and children of the day. Therefore, let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay awake, alert, and sober. My brothers and sisters, we know what's coming. We know who is coming. And he gives us the grace to transform each moment into an opportunity for sanctification. Indeed, to be awake, sober, and alert. As a child of the light and of the day, it means to be like the woman in Proverbs and the man in the Psalm. To fear God, meaning to put him first and to live accordingly. To do good and not evil. And to work and produce good things for everyone's benefit. The men and women who fear God and act accordingly are indeed to be praised and blessed. They are entrusted with talents, abilities, potentialities. They employ them and they bear fruit. Indeed, they receive a reward. They share in their master's joy when he calls them to account. The master in the parable calls the servant who did nothing with the talent that was entrusted to him wicked and lazy. And then he punishes him by taking away what had been given and by having him thrown into the darkness outside where there is wailing and gnashing of teeth. Indeed, a removal from communion with God. And this is why it's good for us to take to prayer the words, Lord, may I bear good fruit. So what are we waiting for? My brothers and sisters, we are waiting for God. We wait for him and we receive him when he comes daily in the Eucharist. We wait for him seasonally when he comes in the liturgical commemoration of the Word made flesh in Christmas. We wait for him at that moment when he will judge each and every one of us at the end of our earthly lives, and we do so with eager anticipation because we are of the light. What are you waiting for? My brothers and sisters, consider your own spiritual waiting. Do I have the oil of being in the state of grace, or am I empty in the state of mortal sin? Am I being vigilant with the talents that the Lord has entrusted me with? Is my life bearing the fruit that Christ wants to see? And after taking all of these considerations into account, if you find yourself lacking, do something about it. Go to confession. Take up the corporal spiritual works of mercy. Visit the Blessed Sacrament in the chapel to better know the beloved. Bear good fruit. What are you waiting for? Next week we will explore the third parable, which is a familiar parable to each and every one of us. It's the parable of the sheep and the goats. And it will give us a glimpse into the judgment that will come at the end of time, when the Son of Man comes in glory. And until that awesome day, let us wait with eager anticipation of the Lord. Let us transform the moments that are placed before us with grace, and let us wait. May Saint Joseph intercede for us, that we may be ready, to greet him when he comes. Saint Joseph, pray for us.